Welcome to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. A reminder, we're streaming live on Sportsnet's YouTube channel, airing live on Sportsnet 360, Monday to Friday from 2 to 3 p.m. Make sure you find the Raptors Show wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe. Please rate and review our show. I'm your host, Alex Wong. William Liu is still day-to-day with a non-COVID illness. Get well soon, Will. Please come back and take your show. But for this Friday, I am joined by one of my favorites, James Herbert of CBS Sports. James, how are you, man?
I am doing great. You're one of my favorites too, Alex.
Oh, okay. Yeah. You only ever tell me that on air, though. Like, you never say this privately, so I don't know if you actually mean it.
I absolutely mean it. And I'm not, like, mean to you privately, am I?
No. I think I'm actually one of the meanest people when it comes to just like, talking to people. By the way, 2 theories on why Will is sick. So, he interviewed Thad Young earlier this week. I'm not trying to blame Thad Young because, I'm a huge Thaddeus Young fan, but he did come back from the interview and said, Thad was coughing a little bit. So that's one theory. And the second theory is at the arena when the Raptors played the Kings on Wednesday, we both had a very raw, burger at the place, but I'm feeling fine. So maybe he came down with sickness from that too. So those are the 2 working theories. Which one do you want to go with?
Well, I don't really want to blame Thad, but I think if I'm picking between those 2, I sort of have to. Like, if you're fine after having the exact same burger, I don't think that was what it is.
Yeah, but my stomach been through a lot more than Will, man, is all I'm going to say. So, I don't know.
You just wanted to brag about your, like, digestive system.
Yeah, this is like looking at traditional versus advanced stats, You got to dig a little deeper when you're doing the comparisons here. But what we're going to do today is grade the Toronto Raptors because, everybody is so thrilled with how they are playing at the moment. I thought it'd be a good time. And especially since I just had my company annual review as well. It's been a full day of grades. So I thought we would go through the players and, talk about the overall team as well. And of course, Nick Nurse and the front office. And then later on, we can talk a little bit about Raps Nets. You can explain this Joe Mazzulla thing to me. And we will, of course, play who he played for. But let's start with grading the 2022-23 Raptors. So just to tee it up, the Raptors through 28 games, very similar to last season if you're just looking at the peripherals. They were also 13-15 last season at this point. And they have the 15th ranked offense in the league, which they finished with last season. They're 11th on defense at the moment. Last season, they finished 9th. This year, they're 28th in three-point percentage. Last year, they were 20th. So just looking at those big picture numbers, very similar. But I do feel like the vibe and mood of the team and how, people are looking at this Raptors team is very different. And I guess the simple answer, James, is that, expectations change from year to year.
Yeah, I mean, they were supposed to build on last season. They were supposed to have internal development. I think there was a lot of reason for optimism coming into the season. Even after the season started, people were pretty optimistic about the Raptors. I was personally, like, up until a couple of weeks ago, I guess, like, basically before Pascal Siakam came back, like, I was willing to write off any struggles they had to, like, okay, they're not completely healthy. And I was pretty optimistic about, like, what I saw early in the season, particularly from Pascal Siakam, who is still just sort of the shining star of this Raptor season so far. But as a team, I think it has been underwhelming on the whole. It has been weird. It has been a lot weirder than just what the record and the numbers sort of indicate, right? Like, they're the 29th team in terms of half court offense. They have been bad.
We moved out of 30th.
I think I can't remember who is 30th, but yeah, the Raptors are not 30th.
That's a win.
26th in 3-point frequency. They're shooting 26.5% on pull-up threes, which is the second worst in the league, which I can't even believe. The Spurs number was like 20.5%, which is just disgusting. But I mean, there have been some offensive positives too. I mean, they're getting to the line more than last year. They're getting to the rim a bit more than last year. They never turn the ball over. They're like slightly worse in terms of offensive rebounding compared to last year, but still an elite offensive rebounding team. They're absolutely incredible in transition, like the best transition offense in the league. It's just, I think if it were only us talking about their style and how interesting it was, and they were average on offense, and that was the whole story, be like, okay, like this is how they built the team. But you've just seen some regression in terms of how committed they seem to that style, how well they're executing that style lately. The defense has slipped. And I think the ceiling is much higher there. And it's like watching them, like the vibes, as you said, have been weird. Just the sort of the effort in some games in particular has been bad, and that's been directly called out by both Nick Nurse and several players on the roster. I think you still have to kind of mention the caveats when you're talking about all of this stuff. Like health has been a big issue, both in terms of their frontline guys and just like role players that were supposed to tie the room together. They haven't had the team exactly that they thought they'd have. Precious Achua, we were talking about, is like, is he going to be a most improved player candidate coming into the year? And we've barely seen him. So I think there's a lot of room for growth, but they're not exactly trending in the right direction after what we've seen in the past few games.
Yeah, I think the one thing you pointed out too, just about like the room for growth when people are looking at this team and the overall roster construction, and it's been such a talking point, especially recently as they're going through this slump right now. And I think that really is a big question. And you know, the way we're gonna do the grades today, we're not gonna do the letter grades. I think we've agreed that, you know, for every topic, you know, the team, the players, you know, the front office, we're gonna either say that they've met expectations or they've underperformed or overperformed. And I assume you're in agreement with me here when we're talking about just the overall team at this point in the season, that they're clearly underperforming.
Yeah, I mean, I thought they'd have a better record than this, and I'm more just surprised at how awkward everything kind of feels for them. Like they feel kind of stuck in a weird place right now, and that's more what I'm kind of judging this on rather than strictly like their point differential in the record.
Yeah, and if you're looking at, you know, we called out all these stats and we talked about the vibe of the team and all of that stuff. When you look at all that stuff, like what is the one thing that you know you would say concerns you the most if you were looking at this team moving forward?
I think the defensive kind of like the slippage that we've seen lately, and also the way, like just anecdotally, like the way that they've been talking about it, like Um, I was at the Brooklyn game where afterward Nick Nurse is just talking about how they just flat weren't executing the defensive scheme right. Like they wanted to blitz Kevin Durant and they weren't in the right places. They weren't the guy who was blitzing wasn't in the right spot, and then the guy who was supposed to be rotating afterward wasn't there fast enough. And that is like just scheme execution that a team like this was like pretty good at last year. And when they did make a mistake, they were really good at covering that up with just that sort of effort. And then you've heard effort issues like after the Pelicans game, after the Brooklyn game, and then after this Kings loss the other night, hearing Van Vliet and Nurse talk about, just letting guys get by them at the point of attack, getting easy rim touches. Like you're not supposed to be able to do that against the Raptors. Like you're not. And that kind of stuff is what is kind of getting to me more than like, yeah, the 3-point shots are not falling, which is like obviously a huge problem. And if you're talking about like the construction of the roster, then you start with the shooting. But if you're talking about what like the other stuff and what I'm concerned about, it's that. It's them not looking like the Raptors all the time. It's been inconsistent in that respect over the past little while.
Definitely. So let's dive into the players. So I'll go through each one, and you know, I prepare some stats too. I'm sure you have some stuff. Man, it's a lot of work when Will's not here. So let's start with Fred Van Vliet. Fred Van Vliet last season, 37.9 minutes per game. This season, the focus coming in was limiting Fred's minutes, playing him off ball, and I did make the joke that he was going to go from around 38 minutes to 37 minutes, and that's exactly what's happened. He's averaging
Hmm.
36.7 minutes this season. You know, we know about the shooting slump that he's going through right now. When you look at the overall numbers, he's a career 37.7% three-point shooter. Last year, he was around that mark at 37.2. This year, that's dipped to 32.2%. So overall, I think if you ask Fred too, like he would put himself in the underperforming category.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on Fred's season so far?
So I don't like to overreact to shooting slumps and bad shooting numbers, but I think like if we're trying to evaluate how he's played so far, like that has to matter. And it's the specific shots that he's missing too. Like Fred over the past few years has, he's played a ton of minutes. He's also seen his usage rise year over year, and he's had to take a lot of difficult shots with not great spacing, often late in the shot clock. And sometimes his 3 point percentage hasn't reflected his true kind of ability as a shooter. But this year, that's not really what's happening. Like he's at 31.4% on catch and shoot threes. His wide open 3 point percentage is down, and you can just kind of see it when you're watching. Sometimes his shots are missing left right instead of long short. It's been kind of strange. I am not like, if I'm projecting forward, like I expect Fred VanVleet to be one of the best floor spacers in the NBA, and he's a guy that can shoot difficult threes. He can shoot deep threes. That's been a big part of like the Raptors trying to get some semblance of spacing over the last few years, where they haven't always had even four shooters on the court, let alone playing five out, is having Fred stand like 28 feet out and defenses having to pay attention to him. I think he is going to be that guy, but the shooting just hasn't been there in the same way this year. I think the at rim shooting, we saw a little bit of a rise in that last year. That's down again to what it basically was before that. He is getting to the line more, which is encouraging. But I mean, it's not a surprise when you look at like the on-off numbers that have been amazing the past couple of years. They're not the same this year because he is not giving them the same kind of offensive boost, I think, that he was in years prior when he was one of the best shooters in the NBA.
Yeah, Will's in the YouTube chat. Apparently, he's going to be grading every player. So he's spiritually here with us. He's giving Fred a C on the season. Yeah, I will say too. I think Fred's just such a barometer for the fan base in terms of frustration towards the team. And it's like not that long ago that I remember when Pascal was out earlier this season that Fred had like huge performances to carry this team. And there was a lot of talk even back then when he was struggling early in the year of whether he should be coming off the bench. And I do feel like the conversations with Fred can get really extreme. And, he is going through a shooting slump right now. But, I mean, he was coming off a really good game. I know he was 2 of 8 from 3 against Sacramento. But, I mean, he was near 40 points there as well.
He was incredible.
He was incredible. And you're going to need Fred on this team, if the Raptors are going to go anywhere. And I think the separate conversation, and we can have that separately down the line, is about, his next contract and all of that stuff. But, at this moment, in this season, like I'm with you. I do expect Fred to have a bounce back. Next up, Pascal Siakam. So he's averaging a career high 24.6 points this season. The 7 assists per game is also a career high. The Raptors are plus 6.7 per 100 possessions when Pascal's on the court. For comparison, that is close to the league leading Celtics, who have a net rating of plus 7. And the Raptors are minus 4.5 points per 100 when he's off the court. I'm not sure there's really much for me to add for Pascal. I think his work has spoken for itself this season. Clearly came in talking about wanting to be a top 5 player in the league, building on his All-NBA third team last season, et cetera, et cetera. He did have the stretch when he was out with injury, but clearly he's overperformed expectations this season.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's played an all NBA level. I'll go even a step further with the on off stuff. Like you were talking about their net rating. Offensively, they've been exactly as efficient as the Hornets, who's the worst offense in the league, with him on the bench. And with him on the court, they've scored 116.6 per 100 possessions, which is like an elite offense. You don't think of the Raptors as having an elite offense, but that's what they've been in Pascal Siakam's minutes. He has been unbelievable. And it hasn't happened exactly the way that some might have thought. Like he has absolutely improved, but it's not like he came in and all of a sudden he's this like vastly improved 3 point shooter. In fact, like he is shooting fewer of those. Like the pull up threes are not happening aside from early in the season when PJ Tucker decided to go under a bunch of screens and Pascal Siakam said, "Okay, I'll take those." That's not been what he's doing. It's been a bunch of like hard stuff, ISO stuff, post ups, and when he's drawn the extra defender, he has made the right pass. Like his passing has been great this year. I think he has like made his teammates better when he's been on the court, and he's just been a really like superstar level offensive player in terms of his pace when he has the ball in his hands, in terms of getting to his spots, in terms of like knowing exactly how to get buckets in ways that are comfortable for him. And it's been really difficult for defenses to account for him this year. And when they do try to load up on him, which they often do because, the Raptors spacing is not great, and they've done that the past few years against Siakam, I think he is at the stage of his career where he pretty much welcomes that and he makes the right play far more often than not. So I've just been wildly impressed with how he's played. The numbers all show, I mean, their career highs all over the place. It's just kind of disturbing how reliant the Raptors are on him at this point.
Yeah, and Will Lou says Pascal is an easy A like Emma Stone, so that's Will's grading there. By the way, appreciate James. Hit him up, at 10 in the morning today to let him know that I really needed someone to fill in for Will's absence. And as I can tell through our discussion so far, I clicked on the two most basic stats pages, and you went a little deeper. So I appreciate you, bro. OG Ananobi, defensive player of the year candidate. I mean, to me, OG's overperformed as well. What do you think?
Oh, for sure. I mean, the stats, I mean, we know them. We've probably talked about them a million times. Like top of the league in steals, number 2 in deflections,
Mhm.
number 3 in stocks per game, if you care about that.
Yo, I love how they
And then
call it stocks,
offensively,
man.
yeah, man.
It's like crypto.
Oh no,
It's
let's
leading the
not
league
put
in
OG and crypto in the
FTX.
same
Yeah.
sentence. Oh man. Um, but I think it's interesting to talk about how he's improved and how he's exceeded expectations. Is he's basically been a better version of the player that he already was. He has not completely transformed his game. He is not out here trying to be a superstar. Sometimes he scores in the 20s and has big offensive nights. But early in the year, I think you and I were both a little bit concerned about his approach on offense and him trying to do a lot of stuff like against a set defense, off the dribble, taking mid range jumpers. I mean, if you look at the numbers, he's shot like 32 mid range shots this year. It's nothing. His turnovers are a little bit up, but it's not insane. He's basically bullies people. He's taking 43% of his shots at the rim, another 20% from floater range. Like you can give this guy the ball in the post against defenders who are not as big and strong as him, and he will be able to kind of just put them underneath the rim and score. He can do straight line drives. He can attack closeouts. The 3-point shooting has not even been good, just like basically everybody else on the team. Like he's been an okay catch and shoot guy, but it's not like above 40%. He's like 35% on catch and shoot threes. But he's been a really effective offensive player anyway. And it's been cool to see him kind of figure out like where he fits in offensively and how he can get those numbers and doing it in a kind of like non-traditional way, and certainly more than a 3 and D guy, um, but not like an ISO player you just give the ball to and say go cook somebody.
Yeah. Will is giving OG an A minus, says that he needs him to shoot the three better again. So OG is
Yes.
shooting 33% from three this season, a career. He's career almost 37%. But yeah, no, I think it's been super cool to see the growth of OG, especially on the defensive end and getting that attention. And it is frustrating to see him, out with injury again, because I know that's been a thing that's hampered him throughout his career. And he was making such a great push, and hopefully he can come back and continue that. Next up, everyone's favorite topic, Scotty Barnes. I'll let you lead with Scotty Barnes.
I think we're probably both going to have him below expectations, partially because expectations were quite high coming into the year, but
Mhm.
it's been uneven. It's been like a weird season for him. Like he's strangely way better at home than on the road. His overall efficiency is down, usage slightly up, but not becoming like the main playmaker. You can't point to any one thing and say like Scotty Barnes came back in his second season and he's this like way better creator against a set defense, or he's this way better off the ball player, spot up shooter. That hasn't really happened. Even defensively, he's not clearly a more sound defender every night than he was last year. I think there are games where he looks great. I thought honestly the Kings game was one of the better games that he's played in his career. And he's had moments like that, but I think when we were talking about vibes, like a lot of people immediately their mind probably went to Scotty because it just, we talked about it a lot last year. I wrote a whole story where, like, yeah, it was about basketball, but a lot of it was about Scotty's personality and the vibes that he brings to a team in the locker room. He just seemed to be having so much fun every moment that he was on the court last year, and just soaking it in and like pushing the pace and like just finding ways to contribute wherever. And like he still is that kind of player at times, but I mean, you see him sometimes frustrated when he doesn't get the ball. You see him looking a little bit disengaged some nights, and then other nights it's a different story and more similar to his best games last year. But the inconsistency is the issue, and that's somewhat normal for a 21-year-old. And I think part of it is probably that his role has changed a couple of times already, depending on who's available. But like one of the virtues of a versatile player like Scotty Barnes is that in the best of times, he can scale up or down his role as the team needs it and thrive in whatever role that he has. And I think that has been like specifically more challenging for him as a second year player.
Yeah. No, I think just, there's been just so much conversation, and even, the team has talked about it. Nick has talked about it, about finding that joy in playing, finding that joy in going from year one to year two. So next up, Gary Trent Jr. So, last year he was, again, I think we just keep pointing out the 3-point shooting here, 38.3% from three this year, 33.5. The scoring's dipped like slightly. Last year he started 69 out of the 70 games that he played in, famously came off the bench on opening night because Goran Dragic was in the starting lineup. And this year, there's been a lot of talk in the offseason about, are they going to, get more size into the starting lineup, maybe send Gary to the bench. And, Nick just ended up doing that a little bit seamlessly. And then, Gary's back in the starting lineup now because of OG's injury, but he's come off the bench for 7 games this season. Nick did, tell the media that he wanted better defensive effort from him earlier this year. Overall, where would you put Gary Trent Jr.'s season?
I mean, I don't know about you, but I think it's slightly below
Yeah,
expectations.
I'm
I
with you.
think I could deal with just the shooting being worse if the defense were exactly what we got last year. But I think the defense has been a little more inconsistent than it was last year in terms of the point of attack stuff and just sort of the activity level, which is what Nick Nurse infamously, I guess, at this point, mentioned in a press conference earlier this year. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's not a huge dip or anything, but last year he was like a halfway decent pull up 3-point shooter. This year, the team is getting basically nothing on pull up threes, and he is shooting like 23.6% on those and still taking a couple of them a game. It's just, it hasn't been the same kind of um, sort of feel from Gary as an offensive player in terms of last year. He had stretches where he was going off every night, but even when he wasn't on one of those hot streaks, it still felt like every night he could erupt like that. And that has just not happened as often this year. And then the defense has been spotty. Like some certain nights he's been a really great defender, but I think he's the kind of guy that like the effort like really has to be there, and he has to be feeling good and healthy, and like he has to be moving well for that to happen. And maybe he's played through some stuff and that's affected some of it too. I'm not super down on him or anything, but I would say like below expectations for Trent this year.
Yeah. So Will is giving Scotty a C. Said some great moments, but needed a lot more from him when Pascal was out. He's also giving Gary
Yeah.
a C as well. Says can't be so one dimensional. And as we pointed out, having a down year from 3. I love how even when he's bedridden with sickness, he's still Will's still spiritually part of the show. Take a proper day off, man, please. All right.
Will's killing it. I love it.
Thad Young. I'll talk about Thad Young, Chris Boucher. For both of them, I have them meeting expectations. For
Me too.
me, Thad, a couple of DMPs to start the season. I think, when Christian Coloco made it into the rotation, and at the start of the year when they had everybody like Precious, and, when Otto came back too, Thad got squeezed out of the rotation for a couple of games, but he has filled the role that I think everybody expected when he re-signed with the team. He's been in the starting lineup. He's played the 5. He's helped fill that connector role when he's been on the court. He's a player that you can trust in closing lineups in the fourth quarter. And, for Chris, I think he's close to a steal and a block per game. Once again, we're talking stocks, and he's got 11.2 points, 6.2 rebounds off the bench. And I think just overall, like Chris has really just found his niche. Like, not a perfect player from game to game, and sometimes you can see the mistakes. Maybe on the defensive end and things like that. But overall, like, I don't have any complaints about what Thad and Chris have brought to the team. And, if the one thing I'm going to point out again, the 3-point shooting, Chris was a 38% 3-point shooter in Tampa. Last year, that dipped to 29%, and now he's hovering around 28 this season. Again, it's just overall, man, if we can just get a bit of an uptick from all these guys. So any thoughts on Thad and Chris?
Yeah, I think they both met expectations, and to me, that's a good thing. They've been the two most reliable reserves, since they're most of the time reserves for this team. I always feel comfortable when Young is on the court. Like, I always kind of want that to be involved to get more touches. I think the 3-point shooting is an issue because you want to see him playing with the Raptors' best players, because I think he complements them super well in terms of setting them up for easy buckets. I think he plays well with high IQ players and stuff like that. But if he is off the ball with those guys, then it can create an issue because some of their other best players are not floor spacers. Like, playing him with Scotty is a little bit tricky. And Thad has like barely shot threes this year. This has not really been his role. But I mean, he's a smart defender. He gets tons of deflections. He has those little flip shots in the post or in sort of floater range. And I like watching him play. I like kind of the calm that he brings to the team when he's on the court. And Boucher, I think, he's been mostly available, which is good for a backup big man on this team. He's a guy that gets those crazy blocks, but then also he'll step up and take a charge, which like not all shot blockers do that. I wish he were a bit more of a 3-point shooter. And like you
Mm-hmm.
said, a couple of years ago, it seemed like that was where his game was going. And I mean, he still shoots some, but I don't think teams really respect the three. They certainly don't respect as much as they did a couple of years ago, and it doesn't seem like he's made it like a huge priority at this point. Like, he'll get his buckets from like cutting and like really hitting the offensive glass hard, and he'll shoot some threes. But I think like the idea of him in the past was that he would be a stretch big, and it's a little bit disappointing that that has not been what he's returned to this year.
Yeah, and I think you know if you look at a player like Chris compared to like Gary, like Chris can impact the game in so many different ways, right? Like
For sure.
when Gary's scoring is not there, sometimes it might be tough, like you said, to feel his impact. Whereas Chris is the energy guy, he's crashing the glass and all of that stuff. Will is giving Chris an A+ because he says he's got to secure the next live show with him, and he's giving
Love it.
Thad a B+. Says great interview, smart passer. Needs something more on defense, but maybe that's unrealistic in year 16. Yeah, that young really me, man. Next up, I've grouped the three of these together, just the backup point guard trio of Malachi, Delano, and Jeff. I don't know why I just like calling Jeff Down Jr. Jeff.
I
um,
like it.
yeah, so no, well, I don't know. I mean, the trio's getting the underperformed tag because no one has filled the backup point guard role. And I've always been a huge proponent of Malachi Flynn just because, the famous Alex Wong eye test. I just think Malachi is a hooper. And, people will look at it and be like, yeah, in the small sample, he's shooting 48% from three this season. If the Raptors are struggling on offense, why don't we bring him on? And Will's always like, no, man, like he gets on the court and like, the Raptors just bleed points on the other end of the court. And guess what? It is true. Opponents are scoring 117.8 points per 100 possessions when he's on the court, which is close to the Spurs league worst, 118.4 points per 100. And he's got a -6.8 net rating when he's on the court. And I think that lines up with the eye test. Like, none of these players have either earned the trust of Nick or developed to the point where they can be trusted to be a rotation player from night to night.
Yeah. So I have him below expectations too,
Mm-hmm.
and like not not a good grade, but I also think the Raptors should share some of the blame in terms of, developing the guys beyond the core, keeping the end of the bench guys or guys who are not getting in the game that often outside of garbage time, like engaged and involved and ready to play when they need them. You've seen some flashes of that, right? I mean, there was that Detroit game where like, Delano Banton went crazy and Jeff Doughton had a game-winning block. But beyond that, I mean, I don't think I've seen Doughton play. It seems like there's some defensive potential there, but I can't really give a proper evaluation of him. Banton, I still don't exactly know what role he would play in the half court because it seemed like they were developing him as a point guard. But then in the few opportunities that he's had this year, like sometimes he's been much more off the ball than he was as a rookie. And I don't know if he has the shooting touch aside from again that Detroit game to properly do that. So I'm just not really sure where all of this is going. And, these are, I guess, Doughton's on a two-way, but like these are roster spots. And the Raptors aren't getting much out of those spots right now.
Yeah. And next up is the rookie Christian Coloco, who started 15 games as a rookie so far this season. And I mean, I almost wanted to put overperform. Like I just think there were like no expectations coming to this season of him contributing to the team. And we've seen that he's prone to foul trouble. He can't really finish around the basket and all the things that we look at in terms of a player that still needs to develop and get more reps, in the G League and all of that. But for him to have had this role so far this season, like I would put, I mean, I guess I would say that he's met expectations, but in a way you could construe it and say that he's exceeded it in a way.
You totally could. I mean, second round pick and playing the role that he had. I mean, I think in general that would be um, exceeded from someone in his position. I had him as Met, but that was meant as a compliment
Mhm.
because I really I like the upside. I liked what I saw from him dating back to summer league. I liked what I saw from him even like early in the season and in the preseason. Honestly, like I liked him a lot more when he felt like a bonus coming in, like giving the Raptors a bit of a different look. Like who's this enormous guy on a team where everybody else is 6'7" to 6'9"? I like it. I like the Coloco experience a little less as a guy that they need to play well. Because I'm not sure you can totally rely on him just yet. Like the fouling is a big issue. He's an amazing help defender when he is not fouling guys, but he fouls guys a lot. I There's some crazy plays that not a lot of people in the world can make where he's out there blitzing somebody like 30, 35 feet from the basket and then recovering to go make a play at the rim or save a ball from going out of bounds. And like we have seen that, and like the just the potential there of a guy that big that can move like that is really enticing. The production has not been amazing, but I mean just the fact that he's playing a role on a team with aspirations of winning a lot of games this year, like that does say something. But I also think it's not like part of the reason why the Raptors record is the way it is that they've had to lean on him as much as they've had to because of injuries and such.
Yeah, definitely. For Ken Burch and Juancho Hernan Gomez, to be honest, I just for me, like they've met expectations for me because I don't even know. I'm not trying to be mean about it, but I don't really have high expectations for them in terms of being like a huge contributor on this team. So like Kem has filled in, he's played spot minutes at the center spot, and he's been in and out of the rotation. And I think Juancho's started to earn Nick's trust, and he's gotten minutes off the bench. But that's as far as the evaluation goes for me for Kem and Juancho.
I don't know if I'm being mean or being nice, but I had them as below expectations,
Okay. I
and
guess
I think
my thing just comes from, I guess I didn't really have much expectations. So
right,
they've met
like
them.
because
Yeah.
to me it's like maybe I'm being nice because I'm saying I thought there would be more, right?
Sure.
Like
Yeah, yeah.
I think just the fact that Coloco has played like almost four times as many minutes as Birch kind of says it all. When he plays, I mean, he's still making those like little push shots and stuff like that. He can still, do Kem Birch stuff, but he's not a huge threat as kind of a vertical spacer anymore. And like I don't get the feeling that Nurse trusts him to play rotation minutes anymore, or at least trust him as much as he trusts some other guys. You just haven't seen that much of him this year. As far as Wancho goes, I don't know if anybody called him auto insurance, but they should have because it just sounds nice. But he was to me supposed to be like the version of Otto that they would get when Otto is not available, and so Otto has basically not been available. But Wancho hasn't like carved out like a strong role where they need him every night, and he. We just talk about the poor 3-point shooting with every player, right? And that's supposed to be his thing, but he's only at 32% on catch and shoot threes. I don't think that matters that much in a small sample because he is actually a shooter. So he has some gravity out there. But, when he has a bad shooting night, like sometimes I'm seeing him like turn down looks, which he should never do. But maybe because he is not sure how many minutes he's going to play night after night, he is not quite playing with the same level of confidence that he usually has out there. And then defensively, I mean, they're just like, I think he is not the best defender, but if he's the weak link and the other four guys are awesome, then you should be able to play lineups with Boncho Hernan Gomez perfectly fine. He's not like he can't. It's not like he can't execute a defensive scheme or anything. But I think it looks different when the defense is not great and he's now trying to put out fires, which is what we have seen sometimes in some of the lineups that he's been in. Is that too deep of Wancho analysis here? I might have gone too far.
Yeah, it definitely is. You know, I tuned. No, I'm just kidding. I was gonna say I tuned out a minute ago, but no, no, no. I think that was great analysis from you, James. Precious, Achua, and Otto Porter. I just have them as incomplete. I mean, I guess you could evaluate them on their play. I mean, I know people. Yeah, I mean, it's fair to say that Precious underperformed in the 12 games that he appeared in. You know, in the game that he unfortunately got injured and picked up his right ankle injury, and he's not expected back until the new year. You know, before the game, Nick said he sat down with Precious to watch film, and you know, it was a point of
Mm.
emphasis of you know areas that he needed to improve on. But you know, 12 games so far. You know, for me, you know, I guess I'm an easy grader. You know, people who had me as a TA at University of Toronto knows. You know, I was handing out A pluses like it was nothing, like it was candy. So you know, Precious is an incomplete for me. Otto as well. He's only appeared in 8 games. Still out with a toe injury. I think expected latest update was expected to be out another month. We gotta just dip Otto's toe in that cold tub that Thad Young is in all the time, and I feel like that would get fixed once again. Chinese doctor remedies. Any thoughts on Precious and Otto?
Yeah, I think their absence has been felt like really on both ends for this team. I mean, particularly offensively for Otto Porter. Precious, I think, he was, I guess, a little bit below when he was playing. I do think one bright spot was he was like awesome from the free throw line, like 28 of 33, which is a huge deal for him. Like he has not been a good free throw shooter over the course of his career. But yeah, if you thought he was going to come out and like be making all of these threes and making all of these plays, like it was not just like he picked up where he left off the previous season. I think there was a lot of pressure on him to show that he had taken another step and the decision making wasn't always great and the shooting was obviously not good because basically nobody's shooting has been good on this roster this year. But I think for Achua, it was a bit more troubling because the vast majority of his looks, even though it was a small sample, were like completely wide open, and he was just missing them. So when he does come back, I think he'll give the team a huge boost defensively. They miss him, they need him, and then ideally, he'll also give them a boost offensively, but that's kind of TBD. With Porter, we know what he is. The Warriors miss him immensely, and I think the Raptors miss him too. He was supposed to be the guy that tied a lot of lineups together. The bench was horrific shooting threes last year, and you thought, well, now they have Otto Porter. This is like different. They can have lineups that make a little bit more sense offensively, that don't have to be quite so reliant on winning the possession game, and they just haven't been able to get to those lineups. So I think we've just seen so little that incomplete makes perfect sense. I didn't know that I was allowed to do incomplete, so I put them both as below, but it was basically because like we haven't seen them.
Yeah, no, for sure. And you know, I mean, I was gonna talk about Nick Nurse and in the front office too, but I might save that too for when Will comes back next week because I feel like we're gonna have a larger conversation on that. But like I think overall, you know, before we take the break here, like I think the big question when it comes to Nick Nurse is like, is he getting the most out of the roster? You know, is he getting the best out of this group, or is he being hampered because the roster hasn't been constructed in a way that you know puts him in a place to succeed? And that leads into the question of like you know have Bobby and Masai in the front office done enough to you know especially this offseason to address the team's needs? Any quick thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's tricky. I think all this stuff is tied together with the sort of issues that the team is having and the roster building and Nurse trying to get out the most out of the roster and the injuries and all of this. I think if you zoom all the way out though, it's like the Raptors are trying to win at a high level and they're trying to develop players at the same time. Like always. This is what they do. And there's nothing wrong with doing that, but it can make things a little more complicated if you're not winning at the high level because then you can get in a situation like I think you have now, where it's like, okay, the wins aren't quite there. The development isn't quite there because some of the guys that we talked about earlier that have some upside either aren't reaching it immediately or aren't even playing. So there's a lot more attention, I think, on the fact that, like we talked about, like there are, we talked about 3 of them, but there's like a handful of roster spots if you include the two ways going to players who have not really produced much, if anything. And now the Raptors are in this sort of awkward place. If they were just a win now team, then it's simple. Like, you can't have that. You need to make some sort of win now move, perhaps multiple win now moves, to try to get to a place where A, you have just a lot more shooting than you do now, and B, you're more kind of injury resistant than they've proven to be so far. And if it were a rebuilding team, then it's also simple. Like, it doesn't matter that some of the young guys aren't producing. You just play them anyway because it's all about the future. But they're in between, and it's a little bit trickier when you're in between. When you're winning and you're in between, then it's all cool. But I think there's been a lot of angst, and there's been a lot of just kind of awkwardness around the results that we've seen from the Raptors lately. And I think some of that is directly related to just the construction of the roster, and frankly, like, the difficulty of what they are trying to do. It's not all that different than Otto Porter's old team and what they've been dealing with in Golden State all season.
Yeah, no, I think those are really good points. All right, James, stay on the line. We'll come back, talk about the Raps Nets game, and see if we have time to play who we play for. I'm your host, Alex Wong. You're listening to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Welcome back to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. I'm your host, Alex Wong. Continue to be joined by James Herbert of CBS Sports. Just want to give a couple quick listeners shout outs. Happy birthday to Annie Kwan, and want to shout out Sean and Ann from the live event. Sean hit me up after, let me know that his wife Ann, I think, crossed 11,000 minutes listening to the Raptors Show on Spotify. So appreciate that. And now it's time for Between the Lines, brought to you by Bet Rivers. It's a whole new game. James, the line for tonight's game at Bet Rivers, the Nets are -1.5 favorites. OG Anunoby remains out on the Nets side. The injury report, Patty Mills is out with a non-COVID illness, similar to Willu, and Seth Curry is questionable with right hamstring tightness. The Nets have won 4 in a row. They've beaten the Raptors 3 times already this season. The Nets are also 11-3 in their last 14 games and are now the number 4 seed in the East. James, are the Nets cool now for the rest of the season, or is going to be something else coming up?
It is dangerous to assume anything about the Nets, so I just want to avoid that answer completely.
Okay.
The Nets have definitely been much more of a normal team for the last little while, though. They're pretty much healthy, as you said. Like, Curry is questionable tonight. Mills is out. Mills hasn't been always in the regular rotation regardless. But, you've TJ Warren is playing well after not playing for basically two years. Ben Simmons is back in the lineup again and looks relatively normal, like the normal Ben Simmons. And their defense has been a lot better. Their offense at times has looked awesome. It's just been a matter of kind of sustaining that and doing it against elite competition. And we have not seen the Nets play a lot of elite competition. Some of these wins over the last little while have not been super impressive, like a tight win against Charlotte at home, when Charlotte is not that good in the first place and is also like dealing with several injuries, is like not impressive at all to me. And there have been a few wins like that. So the 11-3 is like a little bit misleading, but trying to stop this offense, trying to stop Kevin Durant when OG Anunoby is not playing, that is a bit of a tough one for Toronto.
Yeah, and the Nets won't be facing elite competition tonight. So, I think, if you're looking for silver linings, I'm not here to provide them. So I think if you're looking to look at this game, the Nets -1.5 looks pretty appealing. Go with the team with Kevin Durant. That was Between the Lines, brought to you by Bet Rivers. It's a whole new game. James, we got a couple minutes left here, so let's play Who He Play For. You got 5 players for me, right?
I got 5 players.
All right, let's do it. So for people that don't know, Who He Play For was the segment still popularized by Inside the NBA. Charles Barkley is asked about players around the league and who they play for. And I guess I famously don't watch as much basketball as anyone else. So, James, hit me with this. By the way, the betting line for this one is also is 1.5, the over-under. Actually, the over-under is 0.5. All right, let's do it.
No, it's not 0. Come on. All right, we're going to start with a couple of former Raptors here. Let's start with Stanley Johnson.
Stanley Johnson, he signed this week. Who did he sign with? Stanley Johnson. Good thing I got Woj and Shams on alerts. Oh man, it's either the Spurs or the Jazz. No, he was on the Jazz. San Antonio Spurs.
You are correct.
Oh man, I might go 5 for 5.
Let's go with Raptors legend Alex Len.
Alex Len, I might go 5 for 5. Just happened to pull out the box score at the arena the other day and saw Alex Len on it.
Oh,
Sacramento Kings.
I knew it was risky because they were just there, but I was like,
I saw him listed at the bottom of players who were out. So
this is the strongest start you've ever had.
Yeah, I'm crushing it right now, man. All right.
This is way too easy. Okay. Let's go with Isaiah Joe. Cup of Joe for you.
Isaiah Joe, the player that most sounds like a coffee shop. He was on the Sixers, I believe. My default answer this year is the Charlotte Hornets, so I'm gonna go with the Charlotte Hornets.
The Oklahoma City Thunder.
Yeah, that's close enough. That's the other default team when you don't know. All right, man, I thought I was gonna run the table, throw a perfect game here, but
this could be your best one. I don't think
this is already my best round, bro.
Yeah, I'm impressed. But I'm also disappointed in myself. I feel like maybe I should have gone harder. All right, let's go with this is an actual rotation level player in the NBA, Bryn Forbes.
Bryn Forbes. I might get this one too. Isn't he back on the Spurs?
No.
Oh my God. Where is he?
I love. You're always like one team late. When you get them
I
wrong.
know.
I love that.
Where is he?
He's on the Timberwolves. He's on the Timberwolves.
He's on the Timberwolves? Man. Yeah. All right. I guess I got to watch more Rudy Gobert this season. Damn. All right. I got to break 500 here. I'm 2-2 right now. Feeling good.
This is the most prominent player, I think, in terms of like the popular consciousness that I've ever put on this. But I thought about it for a while. I was like, he might not know. Boban Marjanovic.
Oh, I might get this. Houston Rockets.
You should get it.
Houston?
Yeah, you got it.
All right.
Yeah.
You got any more for me? Somehow we got 2 minutes left.
Oh my goodness.
You didn't prepare though. It's all good, man.
Just off the top of my head. Yeah,
no, it's all good. It's all good. I went 3-2. I'm feeling.
You could just try
good.
to name other members of the Houston Rockets. That might work.
Let's not do that. No. I think you know what? I'll take my 3-2 and just run with it. You know, you made the mistake of not knowing that I put, you know, the prominent national reporters on text alert. So I see every signing, and you make the mistake that sometimes I scan the box score, you know, post game at the Raptors game. Those are your mistakes today.
I try to be sneaky and take guys who have like just changed teams or maybe just played Toronto. So if you get them wrong, I can shove it in your face. But the risk I take every time is that you'll get them right for exactly those reasons.
Yeah, no, I think you do get a kick out of naming, like, you know, embarrassing me by choosing like former Raptor players that I'm supposed to keep in touch with. And
I didn't do any
like
Canadians this time.
Oh yeah, I think there's too many Canadians. You know, the problem is the Canadians are actually too good now. So like I actually probably know the Canadians. Even even Caleb Houston on Orlando. And
wow.
who's teammates with my favorite player, Admiral Schofield. So
he's your favorite player now? I thought you were gonna say Bol Bol was your favorite player.
Bol Bol, you know, the only Bol Bol I acknowledge, as I've kept saying, is Red Panda. Yeah. So that's the only Bol Bol I acknowledge. We made it. James, I really appreciate you joining me today. Hope you have a great weekend and happy holidays to you, your family, and everybody.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Appreciate you, man. And that does it for us for today. I'm your host, Alex Wong. You've been listening to The Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Make sure you find The Raptors Show wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe, and please rate and review our show. A reminder, we're streaming live on Sportsnet's YouTube channel and airing live on Sportsnet 360 Monday to Friday from 2 to 3 p.m. Thanks again to James Herbert of CBS Sports, my favorite board producer, Derek Brandeo, Jennifer Rolnick, helping us with a YouTube stream. Welcome back. I'll talk to you Monday. Feels good, man. Said Kawhi would stay. Said Kawhi would stay. He stayed in our hearts.